Okay, so I wanted to talk you through how I made the stool design that you guys have been looking at. And I'm going to do it pretty quickly just because that information, you guys have learned how to do the three different tools that I used. And I want you to kind of be making most of the dimensions yourself. So I'm going to start by making the actual seat. The first thing I did was I just made a circle, and I did that by holding that shift key down so I had a perfect circle. And I'm going to make it a different color just so that I can see it. And then what I did is I wanted to check the dimensions. So it's a little over 2 3/4 of an inch right now. I'm going to take it down to 2 inches. And then I'm going to make a rectangle. And the rectangle, what I'm going to do is the height of the rectangle is going to be the width of my wood. And the length of my rectangle is going to be kind of whatever I want it to be. So the height, I can go over here to the properties tab and I can actually input 3 millimeters and it will convert that information to inches for me. And then I'm going to make the width, I think I'm going to do 1/2 inch. Yep. So I'm going to take away the outline because that adds like thickness to the shape that I don't want. And then I'm going to make another one. I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to pivot it so that it is going vertical. And I'm going to change these color. Oops. Make sure that fill is selected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these, and over here I have my align area and properties, and I'm going to go to the horizontal align and the vertical align, and that's going to line them all up. And then I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to do the click to exclude, and that's going to remove those 2 rectangles. I have to delete that little square. And now I'm left with my stool seat. So then I'm going to be making the legs. And the way I'm making the legs is I use the pen tool. And I'm going to start by saying the legs are going to go, let's say, 1.5 inches. So I'm going to just go and change that in here. I tried to get close, but sometimes it's not perfect. And I'm going to flip my stroke and my fill so that the line actually shows up. And I'm just going to pull that line down, and I'm going to make the bottom 3 inches. And then I'm going to just copy that line again. And actually I want this to be 2.5. My bottom's going to be 2.5. And then this line is going to be my height line, and that's going to be 3. So then I'm going to connect all of these together, and what I want to do is I want to make sure everything is lined up really well because this is going to be my guide for making the outline of my leg. So I'm going to select these 2 lines, and I'm going to go to the horizontal align tool to make sure they're perfectly centered, and then I'm going to go down here to this vertical align bottom. So what that does is it makes sure that this line is touching perfectly at the bottom of this line. So I'm going to group those together, and then I'm going to select these 3 lines. I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of the bottom, I'm going to vertical align to the top. So now I've created this guide for myself. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lock this down, and I'm going to do that by hitting Command 2. And what that does is I can actually draw on top of this, and it won't be able to move. And that's going to be helpful for me. So I'm going to pick a different color now, and I've got my pen tool selected, and I'm just going to use my guide, and I'm going to go to each anchor point, and I'm going to click. And when I get to that final one, that circle pops up, and now I've created my actual shape. So I'm going to flip that fill, and now I've got my shape. So I'm going to copy the legs later, but I'm just showing you these are going to be the same legs. So then I'm going to round out the edges a little bit, just because I like the look of that. And I am going to create a second one. And this is going to be a little bit tricky just to make sure everything looks the right way. But I'm going to manually make this smaller. There's a way to do a scale, and that's a really nice way to do making everything smaller in a very controlled way. But I'm not going to do that for this design. So I'm going to do a smaller hole this time instead of the bigger one that I used on the original leg. So then I'm just going to center all of it so that it's nice and even. And I'm going to do that same button that I used for the stool seat. And I can check over here if you have a white design. Just pull it off of your artboard onto the paste board, which is what this big gray area is, and you can see that's a hole. So now I need to create my notches, and it's going to be a similar experience to this seat. So what I will do is I'm going to just draw a random rectangle, and I'm going to change the color. And I want my rectangle, again, I want the shorter piece. I want the width of my rectangle to be 3 millimeters. Oops. And then the height, I'm going to drop this down, and I am just going to scale this at 50%. All right, so I have this rectangle here, and I'm going to make sure it is completely lined up with the bottom of my leg. So it goes from top to bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I want this to be half of the bottom of the leg because I'm going to be cutting out that section. So I'm going to just go over here to height, and I'm going to do /2, and that's just going to divide that number by 2, and it's just going to do it for me. So then I am going to copy this because I'm going to use this again in a little bit, and I'm going to drag this up, and as soon as it's kind of locked in place, so you can kind of feel it whenever it lines up right, it'll lock itself. I'm going to drag it up just a little bit. So I know it's at the halfway point here, but I want to make sure it cuts through here. So then I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to delete that rectangle. And now this guy is almost done. I'm going to do the same one with this one, but it's going to go at the bottom. And for this one, you can do that, line it up with the bottom trick again, or you can do what I did earlier, and I'm going to probably do both. So it's lined up, then I'm just going to drag it down. So, same thing. So now I have 2 legs, and one slots into the other, but right now there's no opening for them to fit into each other. And what I really like about this design that I found was this opening is smaller than this leg. And that's because if this leg matched this opening, it would probably not work as a stool. And I want you guys to figure out why on your own. So now what I need to do is I need to make sure these 2 pieces can go together. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the tops of these legs. And the way I'm going to do that is I want to recreate this rectangle. So I am going to make a rectangle that is, the width is going to be 0.5, and I'm going to make the height 3 millimeters again. I'm going to bring it down to my little rectangle over here. And it's going to look a little awkward on mine just because I made this so much smaller than my other design that I've been working with. So I'm going to center it on my leg, and you can do it by just waiting until that pink line pops up, or you can just select both and do that center tool and just be super sure. So the way that I did this whenever I've been working on this design is I have this rectangle, and this is my place marker. So for both legs, there is a section sticking up, and then the leg goes down. And the way I did it wasn't by adding it to the top. I did it by subtracting from my original leg design. So I'm going to copy and paste this rectangle 2 more times so it's lined up. And it definitely helps to change the color of your rectangles so that they don't match. So now I can see this one's in the middle, and I have these 2 guys on either side. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend this out a little bit and extend this guy out a little bit so that they're cutting off completely. And this guy just goes up, and then I do that exact same thing that I've been doing this whole time where I cut it out. Now you can see I did not pull my rectangles up high enough, and so I've got this awkward blue line, so I'm going to have to do it again. And I'm just going to make sure these two are at the full height. And see, they just moved a little bit. So now I'm going to try again. And there we go. So then I can just delete those again. And now I've got my leg going. And you can always round out these corners if you want to. Or you can just leave them as they are. I'm just going to leave them as they are for now. So then I'm going to do the same thing with this guy. I'm going to take this over, center it, pull it to the top, copy it. I'm waiting until that little pink line pops up, that intersect line. And that's how I know that those two rectangles are actually matching up. Pull this guy up, and then I'm going to eliminate them. And now I have these two legs that are matching, except for these notches. So this is the one that goes, it notches down onto this one. So this is the piece that's going to slot into this blue one. The purple one slots into the blue one. So what I'm going to need to do to the blue one is add that final cut through. So I'm going to take this extra rectangle I have, and I'm going to actually place it. I need to bring it to the front on top of the stool, and I'm just going to make it long enough that it'll just cut through the whole thing. And I'll center it, and then I'll do that same thing I did before. And that will leave me with two legs and a stool seat. Last thing you can do is you can go to unlock all in object, and that will just unlock this guy and you can delete him. And then you're good to go. And I would recommend flipping one over. This is for the laser cutter, and moving these closer. That way they're nice and compact and we're not wasting any material. And that's it.